you're going to probably flunk the next exam, as you should. Probably should, right? But instead, if you know, hey, don't focus on the pain in my ass or the pain in my back or the pain in my throat, all of which are bothering me right now, right? And think and focus on what I'm saying, what I'm trying to get across to you, then of course that'll get you a little closer to the truth in this class as to what's going to count, which is going to be stuff of the test. So the physiologists and physicists were the ones that are noted. And the two that jump out that really substantiated Kant's ideas and led the way to psychology were Hermann von Helmholtz and I'm blocking on his first name now, Gustav Fechner. Helmholtz is primarily known as a physiologist, and Fechner is a physicist. And they make up the rest of that fourth chapter, and that's what the book's going to be in. And they did some things that are pretty amazing and get really close to psychology. If you think about what they're talking about, it seems like these are the people, you know, you take a physics course here or a chemistry course here. They just give you the facts, the science, you know, the facts of chemistry or physics, whatever, and that's usually what makes it hard for you to pass those tests. Probably other things makes it hard to pass those tests. But what these guys are talking about, Fechner and Helmholtz, are not just the facts of physics or physiology, but they're trying to talk about the way in which the body comes to terms with the world around us. How do we know? Going back to Descartes, if the mind and body is separate, the question is, how do they come together? Well, they don't come together easily or naturally. The body is often distorting things. The physical world, we can't always trust what we see. How do you understand them actually interacting? Now, Kant has given us a little model about what's going on. He's saying you're picking up sensation, you're picking up the information about the world, but you actually add the order. Is there any truth to that? Can you see it? Helmholtz was one of the first. If you read the book, I'm going to kind of go through this quickly for obvious reasons, but get what I note down. I'm still working on, maybe I'll have time. I should really commit to it. All right, I promise you. I shouldn't promise them. But all right, I promise you, I will put a handout on Blackboard by Tuesday of next week, because I'm off. All right? So look it up, see if it helps. It might help you with the test. Even though your grades were pretty good, the test was kind of hard. If you know, the highest grade was 10 points below, about 10 points below what the normal was. So maybe the handouts will help you. And pretty much I'll do what I'm doing here. I told you before I had handouts, but the book changed, so I have to change it a little bit. One more thing to do this weekend. Okay, so here is a little bit about Helmholtz. You'll read a little bit about biography. You need to know a little bit about that. He was educated in medicine, had to do military service, was very productive and pretty good student throughout. In fact, he's one of the exceptions. A lot of these guys were not great students when they started off. But he starts off and he does major things. He actually, even to this day, they don't sometimes mention him, but a lot of the stuff that you talk about in physics, physiology, and even in psychology have their start with him, and they just leave out his name nowadays because it's so basic. But he does, as I said, he was interested in physics. Now, one thing I forgot already, before we get to Helmholtz, he had a teacher, and he studied with Johannes Mueller. Okay, remember that name, it's in the book, and will be on the test. And he was a physiologist primarily. And what he was interested in was what was very popular at the time, the law of specific nerve energies. They seemed to realize that the body is made up of different sense organs, and they were getting away from the idea that Descartes had said, that it was canals with fluid floating through them. And they started to realize that it was more like energy that was traveling through the nervous system. Now, what Mueller had noticed was that the different sense organs in the body have different kinds of energy. I think I was talking about this last week. If you are just sitting there with your eyes open and some light flashes, you'll see the light. Easy enough. If you close your eyes and press on your eyeball, you'll also see light flashing. Okay? One stimulus is the light. The other stimulus is the pressure on your fingers. And then, of course, if you're just sitting there and I come up and smack you in the back of the head because you're cheating, actually, I'd probably have to hit you with a brick. But if I hit you hard enough, you'd see stars. There you have pressure from the fingers, the shock of the hit on the occipital nerve or the occipital lobe, and the light. Three different sources of information that when it comes to the eye, all get changed into a flash of light. For Mueller, what he's noticing is that there's different kinds of stuff happening out there, different kinds of stimulation. But when it hits the sensory organ, it all gets transformed into the same kind of energy. And Mueller started to speculate that the eyes have their own specific energy, like the ones we just talked about. The skin has different stuff. Balance is another. Every sense organ has a different source of energy that communicates to the brain. And basically the kind of thing that fascinated him, and this was very true of Mueller, that he thought literally that that's kind of what the categories were, these different sense organs. And basically what he would get off on is the idea that we're not responding to the real, true world. We're responding to the pain on my knuckles from having done that, right? Or the light that's reflecting off the table. The real world that I know as a human is the world that my sensory organs give me, not some God-given gift that's out there. It varies on how you pick up the sensations. Now, one other thing about Mueller was that he also believed that that energy traveled so quickly that it could not really be measured. That somehow what was going through the nervous system, it's not fluid like Descartes thought, it just is moving so quick, it really is mysterious. That point of view, which kind of held sway for a while before they really discovered what's happening, is called vitalism, and Mueller was a vitalist. Anyway, at some point he gets Helmholtz as one of his star students, and Helmholtz is a very enthusiastic student and is taken with what Mueller is saying, but him and his buddies felt that that was too mysterious. That's still taking science and making it kind of like go to all that supernatural stuff, this vitalism. These things are moving through our body so quick we can't measure them. And so he, with a bunch of his other students, kind of swear a pledge that they're going to study physiology, and they're always going to push it towards a mechanistic explanation. They're not going to stop and say, God made it happen. You know, it's kind of like, maybe God did make it happen, but I'm not going to go that route because that's a dead end for scientific explanation. I'm going to push for understanding things in terms of machines. Okay? So that's his position. And then he goes off in his life and he does a few important things you need to remember because it's in the book and because it will be on the test. The first thing he does, he's doing military service. I wish I had a movie for this. Anyway, he's doing military service, but he's still interested in science. And he ends up writing a paper which becomes very, very important. And it's a paper that's about the conservation of energy in the physical world and in the physiological world. And the kinds of things that he's saying, you can kind of understand in terms of what Mueller was talking about in terms of specific nerve energies. He's saying we have a lot of experiences, we pick up a lot of energy from the world around us, but energy is constant throughout the world. It just goes through transformations when it goes through a machine. So that if you have wood and you burn it, right? You have the wood and whatever energy that's containing is being transformed into a fire. And if you use the fire to boil water, then the water becomes steam, and that becomes a source of energy that can be used to move a boat, do whatever else you want to do with steam. Likewise, with your body, you take in food, which gets broken down and transformed into calories and energy, and the calories that don't go on your hips end up going into your muscles, and actually what moves our body as well. So the food gets transformed into calories, the calories get transformed into muscle energy, and again you have one constant source of energy. It simply goes through different forms of transformation. Well, this kind of thing was pretty big news in those days. It's now one of those things that's an accepted fact that whatever you happen to be looking at, there are electrons and there's a whole level of energy below